Hi guys, welcome to the channel. I'm super excited today because behind me is a super important, super exciting car. Let's go check it out together. Okay, now this is the all-new Porsche Macan. It's a super popular car for Porsche, and it's only the second generation of the car. But the big news is that the Macan has gone from being combustion to all-electric, so it's a huge change. And yet, I think it's recognizably a Macan. Let me show you why. The first things first, it actually looks very much like a Porsche, very recognizably so. And of course, I think that's because of the lighting signature here. Does it remind you of anything? Because it reminds me of the all-electric Taycan. What's interesting is I think they split up the lights so that main headlamp clusters are down here, and that allows the car to have very slender lamps up here, very recognizable signature, and yet powerful lamps for illuminating the road. So those headlights are the first hint that it's electric, along with this very low bonnet line here. Remember, electric motors are compact, engines are big, so having motors in front lets you have quite a low line over there. But if you have a look at the side of the car, this is where it's recognizably a Macan. It has the same sort of basic shape of the car, and then you've got recognizable details like this plastic cladding on the side there to kind of narrow its waistline. But I think it is different because the proportions seem to be different. It's got a much longer wheelbase than before. It is actually marginally lower than the last Macan was, but you can see that even though it's recognizably Porsche's iconic compact SUV, it does look different as you go towards the back. And let's have a look at the back together. So check out the rear here. Now, you can see that it is different here. There's a light bar that stretches across, which is a very Porsche thing nowadays. Check this out here. There's no roof spoiler, and I think that's because they want the airflow to not detach, as they say in aerodynamics terms. They just wanted to flow smoothly down to the rear of the car. This car does have a kind of coefficient of drag of 0.25, which makes it one of the most slippery mainstream SUVs out there. Another thing I noticed is there's no rear wiper. Apparently that's optional, but I think that would just spoil the look of this car over here. Just coming down to where the back of this car is, you've got these interesting details over here. There is a rear diffuser under here, which isn't as aggressively shaped as the rear diffusers you see on other cars, but it is basically where the rear of the car ends. It's completely flat under the car, not just where the battery is, but where there are gaps, they've sealed them off as well. And that, of course, improves the aerodynamics. Okay, now I want to have a look at the back of the Macan first, and there's a good reason for that. I do remember that the last Macan wasn't actually very spacious in the back, but this new one seems to have lots of room. And I think that that's because of the longer wheelbase. It creates more space for your legs, and for some reason there's a lot more headroom than before as well. So I think if the reason you didn't buy a Macan before was because you were worried that it was too small for family duties, you probably don't have to worry about it for this one. This, as I mentioned, does have a longer wheelbase because, you know, with electric cars you've got compact motors and you can pull the wheels out. But it also creates more space, not just for passengers, but for a bigger battery. So speaking of batteries, both Macans on sale right now, that's the Macan 4 and the Macan Turbo, have a 100 kilowatt hour battery. That's the gross capacity. The usable capacity is 95 kilowatt hours. So plenty of space both for people and for battery cells. Now, I mentioned that there were actually two versions of the Macan available, Macan 4 and Macan Turbo, which is this one. And this seems to be getting a lot more interest from the press that are gathered here. And I can tell you why, because it is super powerful. This thing gets from 0 to 100 in 3.3 seconds. But before we talk all those numbers, let's have a look at the inside together. Okay, let me just jump into the Turbo here. First thing I see is like many cars have two screens, right? Well, this one goes one better because you've got three. You've got these driver displays, and they're very sort of cockpit-like and very sort of classic Porsche, meaning you see round dials and this sort of curved shape in front of you. You've got this central display, which I think is, you know, the infotainment system that most of us would be used to. What's interesting is that the passenger gets the screen as well. Now, I noticed that in the Macan 4 there were only two screens, so this one must be optional. But of course, the Turbo you would expect to be higher spec, right? So I guess that would be for entertaining the passenger over here, because I'm pretty sure the driver will be pretty well entertained. Let's have a look at the rest of the cabin. There are physical switches here for the air conditioning, which I quite like. So it's quite easy to adjust the fan speed or temperature, things like that. Ooh, ventilated seats. So there's a haptic panel here. Now that's been a Porsche thing for quite some time. Very nice to look at, but of course it collects fingerprints like crazy. But I have to say, it does feel very recognizably Porsche. You know, you've got the sport chronograph thing here, which is to me just a clock and a stopwatch. You've got basically a very sort of driver-focused environment. So, and of course, this being an SUV, you've got this central, I guess you've got to call this spar over here, so that when you're doing a bit of off-roading, your passengers can hang on to it. So it adds a little bit of ruggedness, but let's not pretend. This car is going to be used for the school run, but I think there are many cars that can do that, but there are very few that can give you such a sporty feeling like a Porsche Macan. Now, I'm stuck in a garage, otherwise I will be out of here, but let me show you something that's very, very Porsche. The power on switch for the car is here on the left. Now, you remember, Porsche keys, ignition keys are always on the left. There's a very interesting reason for that. Back in the day, the company wanted to save money on wiring, and this would actually use less cabling if you put it here. Of course, that's not a reason anymore, but it's a nice bit of heritage, and it's nice to see that they've kept it for the electric cars. Now, as I get out of the car, there's something I want to show you, and that's these door handles here. Now, I'm sure you're quite used to electric cars by now having the very flush kind of door handle design, and maybe these little handles that stick out when you approach the car. I'm not a big fan of those because it feels like you're grabbing a chopstick. This one, I have to say, feels a bit more rugged, it's more definite, and it's more inviting. It just lets you know that you're going to grab this, climb into the car, and drive. But if you want something with a little bit more sort of soft touch, let me show you something quite cool. Now, I have the key on me, and you can only do this if you have the key on me, and you have to know the way to fondle the car to make this happen. So let's see if I got that right. No, I didn't. Let's try that again. There. Second time lucky. That opens up the frunk. There is 84 liters of space up here, which is a nice feature to have, and it's something all your friends are going to ask you. The instant you switch to electric power is how big is the frunk. Okay, so here is where you store most of your stuff, of course, and you have 480 liters in the Macan Turbo. The Macan 4 actually has 540 liters, if I'm not wrong. One of the reasons for that is if you look at what's underneath here, there is a sound system. So there's a box here labeled Burmester. I believe that is the subwoofer for the system. So I wish I could hear this thumping away in the background as I'm sort of driving down the Autobahn. But of course, if you do need more space, you can fold the rear seats down. I'm guessing you just pull this. Yeah, and there you go. And that of course creates a very flat loading floor, and you're going to have more than 1,000 liters of space back here. So one thing, it is a Porsche, but SUVs need to be practical, and that of course gives you plenty of space. But enough about numbers at the boot. I'm talking about numbers that really count now. What you really want to know is how powerful is this baby, right? 639 horsepower, that's with an overboost function. And as I mentioned, that's enough to launch this baby from 0 to 100 in only 3.3 seconds. But what's interesting to me is that the top speed is 260 kilometers an hour. Now, most German cars are limited to 250, right? So you can laugh at all your BMW and Mercedes driving friends and kind of blow past them at 10 kilometers an hour faster and go like, nah, nah. But that's the Macan Turbo. What if I can't afford a Macan Turbo, I hear you say? Well, there is the Macan 4. Now this has 408 horsepower, which is plenty because it launches the car from 0 to 100 in 5.2 seconds. Top speed is a little bit lower, 220, but you know, you can't have everything.
Oh, and if you're wondering about range, it is up to 613 kilometers in the Macan 4, that's WLTP, and 591 kilometers in the Macan Turbo. Get out of here, guys.
Okay, but there is one number I'm sure you've been waiting to hear, and that's the price of these cars. Now, there are, as I mentioned, only two for sale now, and the Macan 4 is for now the base model. It's $254,888 without COE. That's in Singapore, of course, and when it comes to the Macan Turbo, that of course costs more. That's $388,888 without COE. So throw in options, throw in the COE, you're talking about, say, $500,000 to put the car on the road, but you do get a lot of car, a much bigger car than before, and of course that 0 to 100 in 3.3 seconds. Having said all that, the Macan has been a super popular car for Porsche. They sold more than 800,000 of them through the years, which for a car maker of Porsche size is a huge number. So I'm very curious about why they decided to ditch all that and go fully electric. Let me ask someone who can answer that question for me. So here I am with Robert from Porsche AG, who can shed some light on this. Now, Robert, first thing I want to ask you is, I've been looking at the car here in this garage. I want to know, how does it drive? How do you make sure that it still drives like a Porsche?
First of all, it really drives like a Porsche. How did we do it? We do have 2 electric motors in the car, one in the front, one in the rear. In the rear, we do have a perfect weight distribution, 48% in the front, 52% in the rear, much more torque on the rear one. So it's really nice to handle, to drift with it, perfect to drive in a sporty way.
Okay, I look forward to trying that drifting part anyway.
Should be good.
But you know, the Macan has been such an important car for Porsche. You've sold lots and lots of them. Wasn't it a big gamble to go fully electric with this and just break away from all that success?
Well, for the next step, we had 2 goals to really continue that success story you said. One was to increase the everyday usability. The other one was to increase sportiness. But to increase sportiness, one way is to bring in a more powerful, more agile powertrain, and that would be the full electric powertrain. So that's why we decided for this one.
Okay, but what would you say to customers who feel like they're not quite ready to go electric? You know, what about them?
Well, in most of the markets over the world, we continue to offer the combustion engine Macan predecessor in the old design, obviously. It's only Europe where we will stop to offer it due to legal reasons.
Okay, so for existing customers who want something tried and true, they can have the old Macan, and for someone who wants something bold and new, they can have this.
Completely right. They do have the choice.
All right, thank you very
And
much.
they might want to buy both.
I love it. Count me in for that. Okay. So that's our quick and dirty look at the all-new Porsche Macan. I don't know about you, but just looking at this car makes me want to jump in and drive. And that to me is what every Porsche should do. But what do you think? How do you like the new Porsche Macan? Are you ready to make the jump to electric? Leave us a comment, I really want to know. And don't forget to hit subscribe. We're just a new channel. We could really use your help. Thanks for watching. See you next time.